We're here to talk about moving, jobs, houses, all that kind of good fun stuff. How many people have a smartphone? Maybe you met somebody this week that's talked about moving, but they're not really sure when they're going to be able to do it. They're not sure if they've got a job yet. Log on to their Facebook right now or send them a text message and tell them to get the hell down to the pavilion, or they have no excuse. And for the rest of the week, you can bug them and say, you weren't there, I'm sorry, I guess you're moving next week. My name is Kirk McNeil, and I'm going to pass the microphone down the way here and just let everybody introduce themselves. I moved here 3.5 years ago with my wife and 2 daughters. I have gotten a job in New Hampshire. I have started a couple different businesses in New Hampshire, as well as a small private school. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff you can do here, and I live in Derry, which is in the southern tier, just about 15 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how fast you drive, south of Manchester.
Thank you, Kirk. And my name is Mark Warden, Porcupine Real Estate. And what we passed out are some state maps and also some flyers, because one of the things we want to do today is answer your questions about different regions around the state and why you might want to choose one over the other. So we have some folks representing the southwest portion. Kirk and I are more in the central portion. I live in Manchester, actually in Goffstown. And we also have somebody in the room representing the Lakes region. So if you have questions about Lake Winnipesaukee, we'll be able to answer those for you. That's Michael Sylvia in the back. And also Seacoast is another popular region towards the Atlantic Ocean. We'll try to answer your questions. But basically, we'll just give us an overview of each area and then try to answer your questions as best we can regarding the industries and types of jobs that are popular in the areas. And also, if you have questions about housing, whether it's rentals or purchasing or zoning or any of that stuff, we'll try to address that.
Hi, I'm Dawn Lincoln, and I'm an early mover, one of the first 100, I guess. My husband and I, Bill, we live in Westmoreland, which is in the southwest corner, like northwest of Keene, right on the Connecticut River. Want me to talk more about it? Yeah. So for Westmoreland, for example, it's in Cheshire County. Cheshire County, the hub is Keene. Anything you want is in Keene. The jobs, the stores, the restaurants, it's all there. And then you go out and you're in really rural communities once you get out of Keene. Even in Keene, there is rural areas. But we moved to Westmoreland 5 years ago, and we love it there. It's a small town, like I said, very rural. People are pretty much mind your own business, which is nice. The taxes are pretty low. The school board does an excellent job of keeping the school budget under control, which is what really controls your taxes. So that's all I can think of for the second about that, but I'll let Bill talk now.
Yeah, my name's Bill Campbell. I'm actually a New Hampshire native. I was born and raised in Winchester, which is one of the border towns with Massachusetts, Winchester and Hinsdale. Again, both 50 years ago, they were both thriving mill towns. Now they're bedroom communities for Keene and for Brattleboro, and even if you wanted to work in Massachusetts, which some people choose to, you have easy access there. Like Winchester, we used to say, it's 14 miles from Greenfield, Mass., 14 miles from Brattleboro, 14 miles from Keene, so you can go in any direction. And that's one of the things when you get into the Keene area. Keene has all different types of housing. Renting an apartment is easy in Keene. There's just about anything you could imagine. Some of the outlying towns like Winchester, Hinsdale, there's apartments for rent, houses for rent, as well as purchase. Some of the towns like Westmoreland, where we live, very few apartments actually exist. They just passed this year on the ballot the accessory apartments, but Westmoreland has no town water, no town sewer. So the apartment buildings don't really exist there. You have to go into closer to Keene or closer where it's a little flatter. It's not one of the hill towns. That's one of the things that limits the hill towns, the rock and everything that's part of New Hampshire doesn't really allow them to do a lot of town water, town sewer type places.
They mentioned that they live in a rural area. Almost all of New Hampshire is rural. And even if you live in the biggest city, which is Manchester, of around 120,000 people, you only have to drive about 10 minutes and you're in a rural area. So Those of you who are from Florida, California, New York, other places, it's a lot different here, as you've noticed just driving up to Rogers Campground. I moved from Las Vegas, Nevada, a city of about 1.2 million people. Here in New Hampshire, the entire state population is about 1.3 million. So it's a great place for us to find rural. If you want to have your own gardening, do your own farming, you can find that. If you want to be on a place that has acres, and you can shoot in your own backyard, you can find that. Or if you prefer to live in a city, like Manchester, Salem, Derry, Portsmouth, those are available also. The reason I chose to settle in the Manchester area is because it's where a lot of the political activists are. I'm in the State House, so that was important to me, and I'd say the largest number of Free State Project movers live in the general Manchester area. And the housing is very affordable there, and there's a lot of jobs. But Kirk has been really good at recruiting and networking with jobs, so maybe you can touch on that a little bit this morning also. And if you guys have questions, we're pretty informal, so raise your hand and shout it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to ask questions anytime. One thing that I found out when I first moved to New Hampshire is that it's a whole lot easier to get from north to south than it is to get from east to west. So if you want to live in a rural area, but you feel like you're going to need to have a job, or you're going to have a significant part of your business, if you're running your own business, that is in a more urbanized area, you might want to consider living somewhere along the I-93 corridor. Some of you guys, when you're driving up here, probably noticed that you can be in the Lakes region, you can be, in some of those beautiful places and some of those rural areas, but you can be in Concord in 30 minutes. You can be in Manchester in 45. In fact, you can catch a bus from Londonderry, New Hampshire, and be in downtown Boston in 45 minutes. And it'll cost you less to take that bus than it would for you to park one day in Boston. So you can have jobs all up and down that north-south corridor, which isn't to say don't go east to west. It's just more difficult. And that's simply a function of geology and geography. It's all about the way the ridges and the rivers run, and not really anything else. So I think for myself and my family, we picked Derry, and we had never lived in the state of New Hampshire. We'd never visited the state of New Hampshire before the day we moved. We knew we wanted to do this, and we looked at some different things. We looked at real estate, we looked at jobs, and we picked Derry because we didn't want to be in Manchester proper, but we wanted to be able to reach Manchester, reach Concord, reach Nashua, and so we found a place that was still technically a town, that was large enough to have some of the conveniences of being one of the larger areas around, where we could get to almost anything we wanted to get to. We went down to the seacoast last weekend. It took us 35 minutes, and we were on the beach, and we can be in the mountains in about the same amount of time. So for us, that was a really good choice and a really good place to be. The kind of jobs or the kind of work that you want to do, whether it's in the system or outside of the system, may have some effect on where you want to live. There's lots more high-tech stuff going on up and down the 93 corridor and over on the seacoast in like the Dover, Portsmouth area than there happens to be in some of the more rural towns. That's just the way it is, unless you want to come in and start your own high-tech company in Grafton, where it's hard to get internet access, or someplace like that. But that just happens to be the way it is. You can also move to New Hampshire and get your own business started for virtually nothing and make your own living, as long as you keep your overhead low. I was spending some time I had a different gig going and was making decent money at it, but I was spending a lot of time talking to some friends who kept saying, gosh, I don't want to work in the system. I don't want to work in the system. I don't know what to do. Boy, it'd be great if I could start a landscaping company, but I just don't have any capital. Or boy, it would be great if I could do this, but I don't have any capital. And I decided I was tired of talking about it, and I would just try to show them what to do. So I started up a landscaping company, bought a $500 pickup truck, and bought about $173 worth of equipment off Craigslist. And I made all that money back in the first 2 weeks, and I still run the business today. It's not a huge money maker, but I sort of look at it as more the gym paying me to work out than me paying the gym to work out. It makes money, it's cash flow, and it's a lot of fun. But my total investment outside of time was $673. You can start a business and make money if you keep your overhead low. And there's no reason not to do it. All you need is a half good idea.
On this sheet that I passed out, we pulled some employers off, just to give you a random sampling of some of the larger employers. For those of you who are not entrepreneurs and really like to have a job before you come, you can see here that there are quite a few that are technology-based. It's a pretty high-tech industry in New Hampshire, especially along the Concord to Nashua corridor. And those of you who are computer specialists, like a lot of libertarians and a lot of the Free State movers, certainly there's good internet access throughout the state. What about in the Keene area? What are some of the larger employers where somebody just moving here might just want to get settled in and find a job and then move on after that?
Well, as you were saying, there is a lot of computer jobs in the Keene area. There's insurance firms, Liberty Mutuals, headquartered there. C&S Wholesale Grocers, which is either number 2 or 3 in the country in terms of independent grocery wholesalers, is located there. UNFI, Alberts, which is who I work for, is in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. We're part of a national corporation. And there's the high tech, there's computer jobs, there's sales jobs, there's jobs for truck drivers, there's warehouse jobs. C&S has a warehouse in Brattleboro that's almost always hiring. UNFI Albert, same thing. There's also in Keene, there's Timken, which is a precision ball bearing company. Peterborough, which is just kind of over a couple of hills from Keene, to 25-minute drive outside of Keene. New Hampshire Ball Bearings hiring. To the north, you get into Claremont, which is just into Sullivan County. Ruger the gun maker, is hiring. Let's see, what else? There's a Badger Corporation in Gilsum. They make the Badger bombs, different lip balms and whatnot. Very good company to work for. What's that?
Lip balm.
Yeah.
I think that war bombs.
Ballum.
Okay.
So but there's a wide variety of jobs in our area. It's definitely not as much high tech, but there are jobs in that area.
And fellow panelists, I believe that we being the state of New Hampshire, has a lower unemployment rate than probably anywhere you guys are from.
Yeah, it would be hard to find a lower unemployment rate in the United States right now than New Hampshire. The last number that I saw was 4.1%. One of the things that keeps coming up is technology jobs. The last number I heard in the technology sector, the unemployment rate in New Hampshire is actually closer to 1.2%. Now, there's a little bit of transition between people who maybe have a strong Linux background, but companies are looking for Microsoft certified this, that, or the other thing. And we can argue the virtues of those technologies all day long, but if companies are hiring Microsoft, it pays to get a cert or two. They're not hard to get, Other things that I have seen in and around the state is that anytime you can look around the state, and maybe you're not a tech guy, or maybe you're not an accomplished machinist or something like that could get a job with Ruger or Sig Sauer, which is over in Exeter. But all of those kinds of industries feed other things, whether they feed real estate, whether they feed landscaping, whether they feed restaurants and bars and things of that nature. It is any place you see a large industry or a large grouping of people who are employed and working, you see all the other ancillary goods and services that surround that sort of thing. We've got several Free Staters that I know of who got here, and one of them in particular, she had a young daughter at the time. Child care was a little bit of an issue, and so she started cleaning people's houses and then cleaning people's businesses and turned that into a whole business for herself that she could set her own schedule and do her own thing, and it's not like that requires any kind of certification. She just had a van and some cleaning products, and she started doing for other people what she was used to doing for herself. Don't let your inhibitions get in the way of being financially successful. Most people who are libertarians or anarchists believe that they have a certain amount of responsibility and that they can go out and get this stuff done better than they could with a government to help them out. Don't be your own worst enemy.
And also, we have a pretty large Liberty community working and living here now in the state. Over 1,000 Free State Project participants have moved. So they're involved in their communities and their jobs. And this is an amazing networking opportunity for you guys. So don't rely on monster.com to find a job here. If you have special skills, let us know, and talk to some people here this week at Porcfest, and we'll try to plug you into some interviews and see if we can't help you out. Do we have any questions out there regarding jobs, housing, anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, doesn't the local tax climate, I understand why New Hampshire does it this way, does it discourage real estate investment, or is there a way to overcome that? Is it, like, it just in terms of buying and holding, or do you have, if you're going for a real estate investor to invest in income-producing houses?
Let me repeat that just for the recording, and anybody else who wants to ask, feel free to ask from there, or also feel free to get up and use the microphone, okay? The question is about the tax climate in New Hampshire and how it relates to real estate investment, buying and holding properties, et cetera, et cetera. Mark.
Okay, I'm in the real estate business. I'm a landlord, and I work with a lot of investors, and I'm an investor myself. Everybody has to live somewhere, so the real estate investment is pretty solid here, but that said, when you're doing your calculations on return on investment, your biggest single expense after the mortgage payment will be property taxes. And that's what he's referring to. As most of you already know, there's no state sales tax here, and there's no state income tax. So the highest tax is on real estate. That's to fund mainly local schools more than anything. And the property tax rate varies widely from town to town. So out where they are in Cheshire County, the rate is often over $20 per thousand of value, $20 to $30. Keene is around $30 per thousand, which means if your home is assessed at $200,000, $30 mill rate, it's $6,000 a year. That's at 30. Other places around Lake Winnipesaukee have much lower rates, sometimes in the 10, 11, 12, 15 range. So if you're looking at two towns, as libertarians, you're probably going to choose one with the lower property taxes, especially if you have no children or if you homeschool.
One of the things you can look, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. One of the things that I've noticed looking at property taxes around the state of New Hampshire is that if you find a town or a region that has a lot of property at the top end, they tend to have lower millage rates because they can afford to tax at a lower rate those properties at the top end. Often they're vacation properties, and people who don't live there year-round and don't actually utilize a lot of the goods and services that might be paid for by those property taxes, i.e. schools. But so that means if you invest at that low end, your millage rate is going to be relatively low and a much lower expense. The Lakes region is a perfect example of that. The difference between a piece of property on the water and a piece of property across the street from the water and a piece of property that is within a mile of the water is, what would you say, Mark? Probably you've got a 50% differential at least.
At least, yeah.
You know, and a corresponding millage rate. You know, the millage rate on everybody is going to be 11 to 15%, but obviously if you're talking about the difference of a house that's a tiny cottage on the water that runs in the $450,000 range, and then you get a mile to 2 miles away from the water, and suddenly you're looking at a house that's twice as big and runs in the $150,000 to $175,000, but you're still paying 11 to 15%. So,
and one more thing I want to add before Bill chimes in to his question about investing. Well, the rents in certain towns are a little bit higher. Keene is high, Concord is high, and the Seacoast are relatively high. Nashua is high compared to Grafton or Manchester or other towns. So you're getting pretty high occupancy rates and pretty high rents around town. So typically the numbers work. There are a ton of 3 and 4 unit multifamily buildings in Nashua and Manchester, a lot more than other places around the country, and those make nice little owner-occupied investments.
Because one of the things I was going to say, one of the gentlemen who I drive with, he's a truck driver, and he owns at least 10 apartment houses in Keene. So because you've got Keene State College there, he rents rooms, he's got apartments, and he's been doing okay for a number of years at it. One of the things is when you have the city of Keene, you have a full-time fire department, you have a huge police department, you have public works.
You have the
know,
Bearcat.
Right, they have the Bearcat. So everything you have to pay for. In the town of Westmoreland, we have no town water, no town sewer, so you don't have a water and sewer department to pay for. We have no police department. We have a resident state trooper who lives in our town. We contract with the sheriff's department. You have mutual aid is what they call it, where the communities around, you call in one central number, they send the ambulances out. And that's one of the things to research. There's a town at the northern end of our county, Stoddard, there's a lot of vacation homes there. Mill rate's probably one of the lowest in the county as far as the taxes, because it's a very small school system. So, and that's where a ton of your money goes, is towards the school. The town that we live in, about 65% of our property tax bill, goes to fund the public school. So that's the other thing, is you have a small school or a large school in a small, or it's not large school in a small town, but the bigger the school population, the higher your tax bill is more than likely going to be.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to say something about the mill rates too, that you can't look only at the mill rate when you're determining if a town is expensive or cheap to live in. It's because different towns have different price ranges on their homes too. Some towns have really expensive real estate, and some have cheaper stuff. Like we used to live in Winchester. The houses were relatively cheap, but the mill rate was high. The town we moved to is kind of vice versa, because it's a small town. There's not a lot of property for sale, so the prices are a little bit higher, but our taxes are aggregately lower. Like if you do the math, the house we used to have compared to our new one, we pay less taxes, even though our house is worth a lot more money. So you got to look at the whole picture of that. Michael, you have a question?
If the property tax is paid mostly for the town services, and there's no income or sales tax for the state, where does the state of New Hampshire get its income from?
I should know that. I'm a state rep, but I'm not on the budget committee. You probably heard the question say, where did most of the revenues to the state come in? And part of it comes through property taxes. There's a statewide property taxes, but that gets turned back to the towns. So mainly it's from the rooms and meals tax. All of you guys that are staying at the hotel here are paying that. I think it's either 8 or 9% so that's on prepared food at restaurants and hotels. And we have a very big tourism industry in the state. Also, liquor. You probably noticed we have state liquor stores. I haven't been able to abolish those yet, but we're working on it. And the state considers that a moneymaker, right? Like they know a lot about profit, but they won't give that up. So the state gets quite a few revenues off of that. Then businesses are taxed through two taxes called the Business Employment Tax, the BET, and what's the other one?
BPT, business
And the
profit.
Business
tax.
profit tax. So those, and then there's some fees like license plate fees, hunting license fees.
Sales of tobacco, because we keep it cheaper than
Bill mentioned tobacco sales. So liquor and cigarettes are really good for running the state here. That said, the sin taxes. The state is fairly lean. You have a question, or if you want to come up. Thank you. He mentioned that. Yeah, he mentioned there's something called a dividends and interest tax. If you earn over $2,000 a year for a single person in interest and dividends, like retirees may do, then they start taxing that. So that is another one. Good question. But overall, the state budget is, I think, $10 billion for 2 years. So it's pretty lean, and we're trying to make it more so. Come on up.
Hi, I would like to find out what is entailed in setting up an LLC in New Hampshire, and how much does it cost?
Have you done that? Repeat the question.
Well, the question is, what's involved in setting up an LLC and what is the cost? The last time I looked at it was about 1.5 years ago, so the fees may have changed somewhat. I think it was about $80 all in to form an LLC. I decided not to go with an LLC personally. I'm a partner in a nonprofit and a partner in 2 DBAs and then the sole owner of 2 other DBAs. We decided to go that route because it's easier for us to work with our potential profits in a DBA situation than it was with an LLC situation, just as a matter of accounting. And liability was not a significant issue for what we were looking at doing. LLCs do get taxed, and if I were going to set up an LLC, one of the first things I would do is to talk to either a New Hampshire accountant or a business attorney to make sure that I was following the right rules and that I was covering myself where I needed to be covered to avoid all the possible taxes and entanglements. 2 people who might be able to answer questions like that are here at Porcfest would be Brandon Ross, Steve Martin, Seth Hipple might be able to answer some of those questions. I would also seek out George Lambert, potentially. He might be able to answer those questions.
Okay, because I have an LLC in Connecticut, and
Okay.
we are making a move to New Hampshire.
Right.
We have our house on the market now. So, you know, I do want to move my business, and
Can you tell me what kind of business it
yeah,
is?
I make soap.
You make soap?
So it's
Okay.
Soap by Judy. So I have, you know, I have my soap business, and in Connecticut, you know, I had to set up an LLC, and every year I have to pay a $250 business entity tax, and then whatever. But through the LLC, whatever goes, it actually goes through my own personal tax
Okay.
to federal and state.
Okay.
It's going to be a lot less expensive and simpler here.
Oh, absolutely, I know that. But
Yeah.
okay. Well,
Assuming,
thanks.
assuming you did almost exactly what you're doing right now, the questions that you'd want to ask yourself are: how much interstate commerce are you really involved in? What's your potential profit that you're going to claim? And what is the potential personal liability? Because if you were to go the DBA route, then your annual cost just to have the business in place would be approximately 20% of what it is in Connecticut. And if you were going to go the LLC route, you'd be talking roughly 30% of what it is in Connecticut. But there are, of course, questions of liability and what you have to do in terms of online sales and interstate commerce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Good luck to you. Buy soap.
Soap is good, especially when the temperature is above 80 degrees.
Yeah, maybe you can get Rogers Campground as a client. Do you make hemp soap by any chance? Hey, she does.
Excellent. We're going to be working on a hemp industrialization bill next year.
I'm not advocating people move to Wyoming, but any state you live in, you can incorporate in Wyoming. And because they don't have any state income tax, they don't collect social security numbers of your shareholders or your board of directors, and you can incorporate through a registry agent, and including moving your business to Wyoming if it's already incorporated. The nice thing about being in Wyoming, and the federal government is focusing on Nevada right now, but in Wyoming, they kind of not have gone in because Wyoming has enough money from the natural gas and coal and oil industries to tell the federal government to piss off when the federal government comes into the state. So if you want to incorporate a business that may be doing something questionable, you can go the route of Wyoming, or if you just don't want to know who owns the company, go to Wyoming. Because you don't have to have a physical presence, you pay the registry agent does it for you, and nobody knows who owns the corporation. And it was the first state to allow limited liability corporations. Because the Rockefellers made the Rancheslaters make the laws they wanted them, the way they wanted them.
I wish I had a nice donor like the Rockefellers.
I might know a couple of people who have Wyoming corporations with New Hampshire DBAs. Maybe.
What else? Yes, please.
The tax rate, I'll try to be loud. Is the tax rate higher or lower for business assets when it comes to real estate? Or is everything taxed, or like industries taxed higher or less for real estate when it comes to?
I'm going to rephrase this question. Yes, if the tax rate is the same for residential as other types of uses of real estate, such as commercial, industrial properties. Is that correct? And honestly, I don't know. I should know. I'm in the real estate business, but I think it's the same rate. And of course, the assessed values on industrial and commercial properties are typically much higher. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Assessments will vary.
Right, it's going to be a
It's
virtue
all
of
based
the...
on the assessed value, okay? So you may see higher assessed values based on an industrial complex, for instance, as opposed to a residential or, investment, apartment type facility. There are some agricultural property tax abatements out there. You'll want to do some research into that because they vary from county to county. And the local Grange offices are actually a really good place to look for that information. There are also certain types of agriculture that are taxed at different rates because, for instance, an orchard or a vineyard is considered improved property because you have an investment in those trees or vines that carries forward from year to year, whereas pasture land is considered unimproved property.
Right, as he was saying, in New Hampshire, your property, what we have is, it's called current use. And you have to have 10 acres to put into current use. So basically, if you say you have your house and your outbuildings on 2 acres, then you have an additional 10 acres, you can put that into current use. And it can be, there's a bunch of different classifications. You can have, forested, unimproved, you can have Christmas trees, you can have an apple orchard, pasture land, is, say, a multitude of things. One of the other things, right, you pay basically very, very little in taxes on that 10 acres. It's not, your house lot could be assessed at, say, $60,000 for your 2 acres is what they value your land at, but that other 10 acres is minuscule compared to that. One of the other things in New Hampshire, when you go to register your vehicles, we pay what they call a town tax. And I have a friend of mine who's looking at moving to New Hampshire, and he said, "Oh my God, your town taxes are ridiculous on your vehicles." I said, "No, they're not." "Well, I bought my car and I paid a sales tax." I'm like, "Well, we never paid a sales tax." So I'm going to use like my pickup, for example. When we bought the pickup new, because I paid no sales tax on the truck, if I keep my pickup 13 years, I will eventually, over that 13-year span, pay what the 5% of the total purchase price, which he paid right up front. And then he pays an excise tax every year, which he said is much lower. But I said, "Yeah, but you paid 5% up front to start out with." We don't do that here. So you do get that. The other thing is when you get house and car insurance, also New Hampshire doesn't require auto insurance, but you choose to get it, the rates are a lot lower. I know people that we used to talk because of my business. I was paying on my house and 2 cars less than they were paying on 1 vehicle in Massachusetts. So the insurance rates are a lot lower. There's nowhere near as much crime up here. Your accident rates are lower. It's how the insurance companies base everything.
Most of the vehicle taxes that you pay, the town tax when you register a vehicle and whatnot, it's going to be based on both the age and the weight of the vehicle. And the idea is that the older the vehicle, it's worth less, so you pay less for it. But the other thing is the weight of the vehicle. The heavier a vehicle is, the more you pay because of wear and tear on the roads, which actually does make some sense. One way to avoid taxes in that regard is to buy smaller, older vehicles. Both of the cars that we drive in my family are Subarus that are more than 10 years old, and my annual fees for registration and plates and town taxes and everything like that, I think the cumulative for both vehicles is close to $100 for both of them. But if I had bigger cars or newer cars, I could pay $200, $300, $400.
Follow-up question. Do you have to register vehicles and equipment that do not move the roads, like construction equipment and farm equipment?
He asked if you have to register with the state vehicles that are not used on the road, such as farm vehicles and construction vehicles. The short answer is no, I don't think so. They'll try to go after you, but if it never leaves your property, that's like a farm truck, I don't think it has to be licensed and registered.
That's the trick. Once it hits a public road, then they'll look for that. And because of the way that they tag vehicles and have inspection stickers, it's fairly obvious what's current and what's not. You'll see, if you look on Craigslist, you'll see people who list vehicles as yard trucks or farm trucks. These are vehicles that are generally, they're not currently registered, they're not currently inspected, and they probably wouldn't pass a road inspection. But there's nothing wrong with somebody who has that truck just to drive around the lot of their business to plow the business, or, run it on the back 40 or whatever the case may be. You do see vehicles classified different ways. There are also, if you happen to be mechanically inclined, by the way, and I have a friend who does a lot of this, he's a great mechanic, and he and I sometimes find vehicles that almost pass inspection, but not quite, and require relatively minor repairs to get them inspectable. There are people out there who just want those cars gone. The kind of people who buy a new car every 5 or 6 years, whether they need it or not, right? They don't want to pay the $1,000 or so it would take them to take that vehicle to a shop and get it roadworthy according to the state inspection laws. So they'll sell a vehicle that's otherwise mechanically sound for really dimes on the dollar, just because they want it gone, they want to turn it into a down payment for the next thing that they're going to be in a hock for. Not to be too biased about that. And you can pick those vehicles up, make a few repairs if you yourself are mechanically inclined, or if you're working with somebody who is, get them inspected and resell them, at a very affordable rate. And if you buy them for dimes on the dollar and you sell them for quarters on the dollar, you've got a used car business.
When you say construction and farm vehicles that hit the road, you are not referring to something that is obviously being towed or obviously...
Right. You will need to register the trailer, which is fairly cheap and easy to do. But when those tires are on a public street, even parked on a public street, they're going to come after you. That's a big source of state and town revenue.
And I think in some towns that have really statist local governments, there may be an ordinance against having a non-registered, non-licensed vehicle on the property. Yeah.
Keep in mind that we come from another state that has a lot of dirt roads. Most of the dirt roads in the state are class 6 public roads, which means they're running community tag on. So if you look at Jeep or an off-road vehicle that used to run on the dirt road in the state, you're going to need a registration up here for the class 6 public roads. Even if they have film legends like those you control, they're public roads.
Yeah, one of the other things, they have different classifications of registering a vehicle. If you're a farm and you want to show you are showing farm income, they're actually farm plates. There's another thing that's called agricultural plates. Those are for the vehicles that really aren't designed to be, they're not daily drivers out on the road, but you want to go to the dump with them, you want to go get feed for your animals. They do have to pass a loose safety inspection. They still get a sticker, but you need one working brake light. You don't need directionals. You can use your hand directionals. The glass can be out of them. It's an agricultural plate. You're limited to within, and don't quote me on this, I think it's like 15, a radius of 15 miles from your house. And basically the old thing was, don't go to the liquor store with the agricultural vehicle. That's not what it's designed for. It's to go to the dump. It's to do what you need to do. But if your farm tractor is going, your fields are all behind your house and you don't want to register it, you don't have to. But a farm tractor doesn't incur a huge registration. If you have a backhoe that you're going to do commercial work with, that's going to go up a notch. Again, based on weight, a lot of it.
For most construction equipment, it's really heavy. So
Yeah, well, there's a different formula because that's not a personal vehicle. When I'm talking about, relative cost, that's primarily personal vehicles. And it does make sense for them to tax them based on weight. I moved here from Detroit. You can definitely tell the roads where the heavy trucks are being moved on, moving lots of heavy equipment. I mean, there are actually like grooves in the road, ruts in the pavement.
And we're not experts on this, so we should refer you to the DMV. Well, we have a few minutes left. I just want to talk about zoning, since a lot of people wonder about that before moving here, especially if they want to build. There are a few towns that have no zoning rules. Grafton is probably the most notable, and we have quite a few friends of the Free State Project that live there. About the only rule you'll have in a town like that is regarding the septic system. You heard, those of you from the city, you may not know that a lot of places here don't have public water or sewer, so you have a well on your property, and you have a septic system, septic tank and a leach field. And as Don just said, the state controls that. So even a town that has no building regulations, no building inspector, the state will come down on you if you don't have a properly designed septic system. But other than that, you're good to go. There aren't that many towns, there are only around 4 or 5 in the state that don't have zoning. So if you want to build your little hobbit hole or clay house, you want to go to a town like that. That's a good question. His question was, if you're going to want to buy some land now, and then build on it in the future, what sort of things do you look for? First thing you want to do is see if it's capable of taking a septic system. So you do a soils test. The other thing is you want to see what kind of trees are on there. Some places have hardwood trees that maybe have some value. So when you clear them, you might get some money just for have somebody taken away. Another is to look at the slope. If it's too steep, you may not be able to build on it. Also, if there's too much what we call ledge, which is granite outcroppings and big granite boulders, if there's too much of that, you won't be able to dig a septic system. You can't build there. So you'll want to do your due diligence before just buying a piece of land off the internet. Go see a good realtor.
Actually, this is something worth talking about from a voluntarist perspective versus a small government perspective and that sort of thing. Backing up to septic systems, one of the reasons that there are laws about septic systems is because in areas where people use septic systems, also almost everybody is on a well system. Now, I would rather this was a totally voluntary thing, but you're not doing yourself or your neighbors a favor if you put in your own subpar septic system and everybody around you is using a well. That's not a good way to make friends or live a long life, for various reasons. When it comes to wetlands, one of the things that a lot of people love about New Hampshire is the natural beauty of New Hampshire. And you will find environmental regulations that regard wetlands, that revolve around some older forest growths, that will involve some of the scenic roadways that have been classified as scenic roadways. And sometimes there are local ordinances that have to do with local waterways. So those are all things that you want to take a look at. The nice thing about New Hampshire, as opposed to a lot of other states, is that for the most part, those are local regulations. Makes them a little harder to find out about, but it also makes it easier to get them changed, because you can probably show up at a town council meeting, and as long as your requests are reasonable and the other people in the town don't think you're an asshole, they're likely to make those exceptions for you. On the other hand, if you just come in and think you can do anything you want to do, New Hampshire is made up for the most part of small towns. And whether you're talking about environmental stuff or whether or not you're talking about working in extremely local politics, there's a whole lot of tread lightly that works well. Coming in like a bulldozer, literally or figuratively, doesn't tend to go over well. Coming in, showing some value, being a reasonable individual and a respectful individual, and then asking for what you want, tends to get you a long way. A lot of these small city, well, not so much city, but a lot of the small town and local governments, they're made up of people who are quite literally your neighbors. And being a good neighbor is talking to those people about what you want to do if it might make a difference in their property and their life and their livelihood. Okay. Even just to let them know that's going on. Go for it.
Also, your zoning ordinances in your town, the lot may look fine to you, even considering all the things they've already mentioned, but the ordinances, there's minimum lot size, minimum frontage, you need to get a driveway permit from either the state. If you're on a state highway, you have to get a permit from the state, or if it's a town road, from the town road agent. So those things you want to check, because people have bought lots that seem perfectly acceptable to us to build on, but your town's going to say, nope, it's 4.9 acres, you need 5. And if there are things that you need exceptions on, most towns that have zoning have, you've got your planning board and you've got your zoning board of adjustment. So you'd go before the ZBA and ask for either, it's called a variance or a special exception if you need to do that. And those things you'd want to do before you buy the property, because once you buy it and then you find out it's unbuildable, then you're kind of stuck.
Okay, this will be the last question, so we have to wrap it up for the next session. He asked about a perk test. Perk is short for percolation. It's a test to see how the water filters down through your ground. And whether it would take a leach field for the septic system, and I think your question was how much does it cost, how much do you put at risk if you can't buy the property. Usually if you purchase a property, when you make the offer, you'll put a deposit down. That deposit is refundable during the period of your due diligence, which would include the perk test. I imagine a perk test could be done for $500 or less, so it's not too bad. And you may want to survey for another $500 if it's a big piece of property.
Yeah, I was just going to say, usually you find a local guy, local contractor, they do these. I was going to say about $350. The other thing is, a lot of times when somebody has a piece of property for sale, come right up and ask them, is this passed a perk test? Because they generally know it has or it hasn't. That's either part of the reason they're selling it, or a lot of places, or a lot of people will, when they do subdivisions and they decide to sell off 5 acres, they'll do the perk test first to make sure that they can sell it, because they want to get rid of the property. It's up for sale. They'll make sure that you can build your house there.
Okay, so just to wrap up real quick, you can reach Mark at porcupinerealtor.com. You can find me all over the place, but if you want to know more about jobs, go to the FSP Job Alert page on Facebook. Do you guys have any sites or anything like that? If somebody has a question for you?
No, but you can find us. Find me on Facebook.
Dawn's the cute one on the panel. And I think we're good, right?
Okay.
That's it. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, guys.
What did you say, Mark?
Stand up! Define the future!
Hi, I'm Mark Warden of Porcupine Real Estate. Let me be your bridge to New Hampshire.
If you want to move to the Free State and you're looking for some real estate, well, I know a guy who's really great. It's the Realtor Mark Warden. Do you want a home with 20 acres, a lakeside cabin, any takers for renters, buyers, and sellers too? Mark Warden is the guy for you. PorcupineRealEstate.com.
There was a story told 1,000 years ago that the oppressed will break their shackles and take control. The